twice. Okay, so can you please press the button that you agree with the recording if you have no objections. Okay, good. So my idea is that you can present your final projects in the form of visual narratives. And today I will try to give you insights into what it is and how it works. So what are the different approaches and variants of this type of narratives, of this type of narration. Okay, I'd love to start from the beginning. Yes, here it is. Good. So the official title of my presentation is Visual Narratives of Non-Migration, Violence and War. So if I use the term visual narratives because it is the sort of umbrella term for comic books, graphic novels, mangas, and so on and so forth, whatever you want to create. So as the quote for as the epigraph, right, the quote to our today's meeting, I have chosen the following. Words cannot always express the horror of humankind, and words cannot always express the complexity of the world in which we live. So and graphic narratives give us some hope that we can do that, right? With the help of those visual images, somehow we can depict the complexity of the world in which we live. I will not stop on this differentiating features of comic books and graphic novels. There are lots of them. So what is more important, I hope, that graphic novels and visual narratives, they belong to the so-called genre borders. So they cross genre borders, right? So they are on the borders between traditional novels and between visual novels. They rely on both words and visual images. Also, very often you might find examples of graphic journalism, graphic memoir, and other genre features in this specific types of narratives. So the main contemporary characteristics of graphic novels and narratives are the following. They're usually lengths. At least they are lengthier than comic books, right? So very often several stories might be presented, and the stories are united by the thematic unity, very often by the visual unity. They claim to be more serious, so they make a claim to truth and authenticity of the subject matter. The first step, if you want to present your final project in the form of visual narratives, of course, you have to find the story. And where can you find a story? During your field work, so you will meet with different people, you will interview them. And also, I know that you will have 2 master classes. One of the master classes would be about interviewing people, and another master class would be about storytelling. So these 2 skills are absolutely necessary if you are going to create a graphic novel, a graphic memoir. The next feature or the next characteristic is cartoonicity, so or iconicity. So it means that you shouldn't create, you may of course, but actually you shouldn't create this true to life images, right? So you can just rely on the reduction of the whole to single, and sometimes details might be stylized and so on and so forth, and I will give you the examples of that. Also, graphic novels are adult oriented, and the main feature, I would say, the complexity, because the plot must be multi-layered and narration as well. You can use color as a multifunctional tool. You can experiment with different colors. You can prefer black and white narration, or you can use colors. So everything depends on the decision of your team. Also, we have the complex relations between verbal texts and visual texts. So just with the help of structuring on the page of different frames, you will create different messages, and so readers will be able to notice that and decode them in their own ways. So complexity, right? So this multiplicity of perspectives and layers are the characteristic features of such types of narrations. It's not a coincidence, it's not surprising then that graphic novels are in the center of attention of such disciplines as trauma studies, memory studies, identity, migration, and of course, border studies. As lots of scholars prove, so we live today in the trauma culture, in the situation of permanent traumatic syndrome, right? And contemporary traumatic neurosis even. With the help of visual narrative, we can document history, we can tackle difficult human rights issues. And I would say so that visual narratives, they help us to tackle such issues, even not quite objectively, but without subjectivity, that's for sure. So, but I would say maybe more or less to stay more or less neutral, right? Because readers of graphical narratives, they have much more freedom in the interpretation of the facts, of the images, of the events they see, than if they have this author's position, which is imposed on the reader, right? Okay, also visual narratives visualize and develop context for a wide variety of human experience, even for those people who speak different languages, those who can't read at all, for young kids, right? So, and that's why they have a huge educational potential. So that's, again, so it's a rule, so, and it's a didactic tool which is used in schools, in kindergartens, at universities. And in the final the final result, so that graphic novels help to develop empathy and understanding, right? So because when we watch stories about migration, about border crisis, so in news, so lots of people just are just distracted, so they don't want to listen anymore, right? So but when you find a novel, and when you with the main characters, of course, so your empathy would be much higher. I will send you my presentation, and if you are interested, you can make your own search. For example, here I rely on the list of European graphic novels on migration, violence, and war, which was presented in 2018. You see the first one, Freedom Hospital, a Syrian story. It's quite clear from the title that the setting of the story is Syria and the Assad regime. And the main character crosses the Turkish border on the permanent basis because she works in the hospital and she needs medicine, she needs stuff for the hospital, and she tries to support it and takes that stuff on the Turkish side. Here are the other stories from the list, so you can scan the synopsis quite quick, but I'd love to attract your attention to the first cover of this graphic novel titled Alpha. So as you see here, so this image is really stylized, right? So it's not true to life image, but why not? So even if you're not, I don't want to say so that this artist is not a good one, right? Yes, he is experienced and he is a good artist, and lots of time was actually spent to create these images, and give life to them, right? But nevertheless, so here you see that such images are not the key moments, right? So sometimes they even be absolutely strange, like here. So the title of the story, The Strange, and the artist used anthropomorphic animals. Of course, this is a reference to the famous graphic novel by Art Spiegelman, right, about Holocaust. And this is another quite famous approach how to create the stylized cartoonicity of the graphic novel. Okay, and other stories as well. So when I searched the net and prepared for our meeting, so I stumbled on the website by the NGO Positive Negative, and I absolutely love what they are doing. I highly recommend you to visit their website. And now I'd love to share some of the stuff they have posted on their website with you. First of all, the methodology is important. So what do you need if you want to create the comic books or the graphic novel or whatever other type of the visual narrative, right? So the first step, you need a team with whom you can discuss the story, with whom you can create everything, right? And you need people who can take interviews. So because the contributors are the key figures in this process, right? So very often such stories, they rely on true facts, and they depict sometimes quite awful and scary moments in our life. But we can do that in this visual way quite delicately, I would say, right? And something which is absolutely different if you watched movies, some blockbusters which are packed with special effects and those images of death and violence and so on and so forth, which try to be as much precise as it's possible, you know. So but in comic books, so you can be you can rely on facts, right? Okay, so then when you have the story, you start writing the script. The next step is to share the script with the contributors, right? So to escape the mistakes and correct the story if it needs to be done, right? And then when the story is ready, so the artist starts to create the images. And this is something, again, which is connected with storytelling, visual storytelling, right? How we can do that. And when the story is ready, you try to share it, of course, with the contributors and with the wide public. Also, their mission and principles impress me. And I think that's very, very important to keep in mind, so that the main principles should be shared humanity, co-creativity. What I love the most, simple but not simplistic, right? We can share simple stories, but these stories are not artificial. They are real stories from real lives. And you know that every life is interconnected, intertwined with bigger events, with violation of borders, with crisis, economic crisis, political crisis, and so on and so forth. There are lots of reasons, right? So another principle is to be relational, to be mindful, to be critical, and to say something beyond the text. I'd love to share a very short video made by this organization, and it is called Life on the Move. So they won several awards with this short cartoon, and I would be interested in your immediate response. So just pay attention what is used and how the cartoon is done. So, and how the image is combined with the story. What are the stories about? Whose stories they are? Let's have a look.
Even though I was born in Yemen, I was of Somali heritage and was always treated as a foreigner. It made me want to volunteer to help refugees. But soon, the same kids who had bullied me became refugees themselves. I left with my family, boarding a boat for 3 nights that was built for 40 but carried 350. I just worked in a cafe with my father, and that's where I met my husband. He came in for an Americano and left with my heart.
After 25 years in Finland, I decided to return home. I opened a dialysis clinic that serves my whole country and region. Some of my generation still don't feel they belong in Europe and want to return home.
Okay, maybe let's stop here for a second because we don't have so much time to watch the whole cartoon, but if you are interested, you know where you can find it. Well, so what do you think about this cartoon? So it is a stop motion animation, right? Okay, so and if you have a smartphone, you can do that. Of course, it will take time, but so it's not so difficult, right? So and you know, so what materials were used? Do you need anything special? Some artistic approach?
No, there were just maps and toys, and that's all.
Yes, absolutely. Anything you have, right? So you can do that. So you need just some stuff, usual stuff you can find in any flat, right? So in any household. Okay, but what is important here? The images are important, right? But also the stories are important. Whose stories are they? They are the stories of just ordinary people, right? Then they are not the stories of some heroes, right? Or famous people or celebrities, right? So they are stories of ordinary people, but these people were involved into this turmoil of awful events, right? Like wars and violence and so on and so forth. And through these small stories, we can tell our audience more than it is, right? So because we understand that each person is involved into the much bigger events, right? So like political, I don't know, debates, right? So geopolitical interests of different countries, geographical, political, economical issues as well. Good, so let's come back to the presentation. And I'd love to give you another example. So I still hope I have time for that. I don't know why we are on the first slide again. Okay, just a second. So I'd love to give you another example. And this is the graphic novel, which is called Crossroads. It was published in 2017. It includes 9 stories told by Ukrainian immigrants from the Crimea and from the eastern part of the country after the violation of the border and the war with Russia for those territories. As you see, the project was supported by the same organizations which support our today's meeting, right? So here you have Meetup, so and now we are meeting in the frame of Meetup project. Well, so I will not quote everything, but on the first, I've downloaded this graphic novel on OLAT, so and also you may find that on Teams if you are there. So if you are interested, you can read that. So in introduction, the events are explained, and again, so the creators of this graphic novel rely on the same principle. So they start from oral history, right? So they start from a biographical interviewing, and then based on that, they create their stories. They create their setting and narration. And again, so they vote like all together for graphic novel because it gives us a chance to speak about violence, hardship, and human rights violations. And it allows to involve many many people into the conversation, right? And to give people understanding of what's happening. And again, we can do that with lots of different tools and so on and so forth. As I said, there are 9 stories, but I hope you remember I told about unity, right? So though this is the example of serialization, we have to unite the story somehow. And here in this case, we have a frame story. There is a journalist who worked in Syria before, and then she arrived Lviv. She is on the way from Lviv to the eastern part of Ukraine on train, then on bus. She meets different people, she talks to them, she interviews them. And we have this blend of a graphic journalism and graphic memoir at the same time. So what are the techniques which you can practically use? I will cover just a couple of them. So for example, on this page, so you see the story which is happening just here right now before our eyes. We don't need lots of mental efforts to restore the story, because we see how the journalist enters the compartment, she starts the conversation, and they talk to each other. Let's compare to the following 2 pages. On these pages, the events from 2013 till 2014 are depicted, and readers need some information, or they have to guess what happened. They have to fill in the blanks in the events here, because we as Ukrainians can recognize what's going on, right? So it starts when President Yanukovych escaped the country, and there were protests in the center of Kiev, and then Crimea was annexed by Russia. So, and this is one of the refugees who left the Crimea. And also then we have the events of 2014 in Donetsk and Lugansk, right? Okay, so here you need the mental closure, right? So you need to understand. So you need to restore the events here. Another practical advice, so how to deal with time and space in graphic narratives. So the space between framed panels is called a gatte. And the wider the gatte is, the longer is the period between pictures here, right? Okay, long time period events is represented with wider gattes in the first story, and we see how Miriam, who is an internally displaced person from the Crimea, goes from one office to another, receiving rejections from local authorities in Lviv. And these speech balloons, they represent chunks of her conversations with other people and her internal monologues. Compare this page with the page from the next story when called The Heart. So here we see that there are no gattes between the panels at all, right? This is an extract from the second story about the doctor who went to the East as a volunteer. On this page, we witness how 2 doctors get under cannonade, and the panels display a progression in time from one instant to the next that is called moment-to-moment transition techniques. And also there is a huge contrast on the second page between speechless frames, right? Speechless panels. And then on one panel, we have 6 speech bubbles at a time. Okay, good. There are other examples as well. So, but if I have just spoken about speech bubbles, usually they are in ovals. But if you add something in square balloons, so it means that you have the sort of voice over. So the form of the speech balloon is also very important, because you can present different voices with the help of different speech balloons. And here is the example of what you all know very well. So this is Special effects lettering, right? This is a method of drawing attention to text, and it often highlights onomatopoeia when we use a word to repeat a natural sound, and with the help of different lines, right? Like here, for example, we can reinforce the impact of the sound on a person. So these zip lines, they create different effects on that person who reads the story. But you remember that I talked about complexity and multiplicity of layers. So in this example, we have the unity of fictional stories and non-fictional ones, because you see here, for example, the list of all main characters. Each character has its own representation, so this special patterns, and this is the first character, and we can find, we can trace her route across Ukraine, so because it is depicted the same way, right? Also, the same characters is represented here in chronological order. So, and here we have the explanation of the key events, why these people became refugees. So what happened on this political arena in Ukraine? So what were the reasons? Also, each story starts from this sort of headline where we have the border between white and black panels, and again the same pattern, right? For example, like here we have this type of pattern, and we understand that this is the story about this person. So visual unity of fictional and non-fictional layers in this graphic novels is fulfilled through graphical tools, individualized borderlines, titles, routes on the maps, connectors on the chronology line. And as well here you can find statistics, resources of information, information on partner organizations with detailed descriptions of their aims and possibilities to help and protect human rights, their contacts, recommendations to inform of violation of human rights, and so on and so forth. As you see, this novel fulfills not only this artistic aims, right, but very practical ones. So it gives decisions how to protect your rights, what to do, where to go, whom to inform. Okay, so, and for wider audience, of course, it's something that can increase our understanding of the events in the South and in the East, but also it is full packed with educational necessary information for refugees themselves. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that we still have at least several minutes to ask questions or to give comments. I would appreciate your ideas. Would you risk to make a comics or a graphic novel as the final project? Does anyone read comics, watch them? Have you ever worked with graphic novels?
Maybe I can say something.
Yeah.
I do read comics from time to time, yes, but all of this this information was completely new for me. So I don't know if I would feel comfortable making this type of work, but it's definitely interesting. Maybe after I've taken it all in properly, then I might be interested.
Thank you so much. So I hope that I would inspire at least one group of participants to create a graphic novel, a sort of visual narrative, you know, so I'm looking forward to see your final projects. Arina, do you want to say something?
I liked the video about where toys and maps were used. It's a little bit easier than like comics because when we choose to make a graphic novel, we we will face the problem of drawings. It can be a little bit difficult for some students, and I think the video was with the using different items will be like an easier choice for us.
Yeah, so you're very creative. So in making those video productions, right? So I think this is something that's why. So I showed you two different approaches how to create visual narratives. But don't be afraid that you lack some artistic skills. You know, so I gave you bright examples so that sometimes you don't need them at all, right? So you can find these novels online, so you can look at different techniques which are used again. So I think that the idea of using different colors is quite promising, right? So something that you can easily experiment with, just with colors and stories, and that's it. So, but of course you need a team of people who want to do that. Yeah, I wish you luck. So yeah, and very, very interested in your final projects. Good. So very soon we will come back to the main session.
See